from the studios of the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, welcome to Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Good afternoon, St. Martin. I'm Cedric Peterson from the Ministry of General Affairs and, of course, within the Department of Communication. On behalf of the Prime Minister of St. Martin, welcome to this edition of Prime Minister Talks. I'm joined by the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Sylvaria Jacobs. PM, it's great to have you on board. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Cedric. Good afternoon, St. Martin, and all within the sound of my voice. It is always a pleasure for me to be here on this episode of PM Talks, so that we can continue to meet our goals to enlighten the people of St. Martin as much as possible. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you, Prime Minister. Last week we were talking about the Caribbean Reform Entity. That was the focus of our conversation in the previous episode. And we left off on the topic of the proposal or counter-proposal that St. Martin will be sending or submitting to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Can you give us some more details concerning that counter-proposal from St. Martin to the Netherlands?
Yes, so as we talked about last week, the Caribbean Reform Entity has been proposed by the Netherlands since July 10th. In a take it or leave it proposal, basically, we had to give, it's a consensus law. So we explained that last week and how a consensus law actually is supposed to come about. And it was not done in that manner. It was like, this is a consensus law. You have to have consensus with it before we can move on and politically agree. And then you'll be able to access or we'll move forward with further discussions. As Caribbean countries, we rejected that take it or leave it approach, and that we go through the proper process of having negotiations and discussions to come to a consensus. And so therefore, we looked at the law that was presented and looked at areas where we could find ourselves. There is absolutely no need for a consensus law in this regard. We can just have an onderlinge regeling, they call it in Dutch, so an agreement between the two countries as to how we will work on our structural reforms and how we will finance such. It does not require a consensus kingdom law, but since the Dutch are insisting on that, we said in meeting them halfway, we would adjust the kingdom law so that it does not touch on the areas of our autonomy that we do not want any further, because our financial supervision is already an area where we have agreed since 10-10-10 to be in this type of an arrangement. So we did not feel that it should be in any sense structured further to release our autonomy, and therefore we presented three aspects for this proposal or counter proposal, whereby the finances, supervision, and implementation is structured in a three-layer approach. Layer one in our counter proposal is maintaining the consensus kingdom aspect, as was mentioned as the overarching layer, which will contain the financial guarantees. So what the Netherlands want, the guarantees that their funds will go towards structural reforms. These financial guarantees do not pertain to any budget support that we would get by the normal channels of the RFT, seeing that we're in a COVID situation. So this is how we propose to separate the COVID finances that we need right now from structural reforms that would go into making necessary changes to improve the services that we render to the people of St. Martin. So this financial layer would also regulate the degree of control regarding the financial flow, which goes directly to the execution of the reforms included in what would then be agreed upon between the two countries in what is being called the country packages or landspakketten. The second layer is the board for the reform support. So the board or the management, the monitoring and supervision of the reforms. This would consist of a member from each country. So this is a key change as to what they had. They were appointing it from the Ministry of BZK, 3 persons of Dutch, from the Dutch government appointed. So everything was Dutch appointed, Dutch regulated, and hereby we're saying the board for the reform support and monitoring should also comprise of the other countries. And it should be 5 members. So we have 4 countries and then a 5th member, because of course the funds are coming through the Dutch. We would support then all 4 agreeing on who this 5th person would be to chair the board. That is our counter proposal in terms of the management. And again, the aims of the Dutch government would be to promote the implementation of the reforms as well as an administrative nature to boost the resiliency of the economy. This is in keeping with what they wanted, and so we felt that it would have been good for them to see that we were willing to meet them halfway on that and still have input. So that included monitoring the execution-based actions in the plan, and also to work on executing the entity in collaboration with all the countries. The deadlines and the goals to be achieved and the processes to be completed are agreed upon, as I mentioned before, in mutual arrangements called onderlinge. So we would still have opportunities as individual countries to agree, hey, these are the reforms we want under these conditions and with, conditions of what type of resources, etc., would be given and in this timeline. And then this monitoring board, where we are all represented but chaired by the Dutch government, let's say, would then have the, oversight on such. The last layer, the reform entity. At this level, the reform entity itself is the executing body, executing the reforms taken up in the country packages as established by, in our case, St. Martin and the Netherlands. So this is now where the onderlinge regeling comes in. And we are working diligently to ensure that the packages we want are prioritized in this period. St. Martin proposed to make this a supportive services structure to the countries that would assist and advise the countries on sustainable and structural reforms that fit within our local context. Capacity building has to be guaranteed through the knowledge and expertise and through traineeships for our people. So we didn't want that the Netherlands just provides assistance to us in the form of human resources, but that we have counterparts built in, or we have landskinderen who are all over the world prioritized as being trained along, so that once this structural assistance is removed, we still have the resources and the capacity to be able to carry what we are dealing with here as a country. So this was all laid out in our letter to the State Secretary. We've actually drafted the legislation, but we are working on what you call the explanatory notes at the moment. And even though it was not down, let's just say, we presented it on the 14th. He responded stating that the only proposal that he is mandated to discuss is that which he presented on the 10th. And so we are very much disillusioned that even on the 14th, when our plenipotentiary minister still presented it to the Kingdom Council, that because we did not meet, or the negative advice of the CFT to agenda point 2, that we ended up not having our proposal properly discussed. So the HEFMIN presented it, but there was little or no opportunity for a proper discussion because we had not met the conditions in the agenda previous to that.
PM, as we close out this first segment, we still want to talk more about that counter proposal and how it serves us as a country moving forward. Coming up next in our second segment, St. Martin, stay with us. This is Prime Minister Talks.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Safety tips on how to use your mask. Wear your mask in public places. When removing your mask, properly take your mask off by grabbing the bottom ties of your mask, then the ties at the top, and remove the mask. When disposing the mask, discard the mask in the trash can and do not litter. Safety first. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth until washing your hands thoroughly for 20 seconds. These safety tips are brought to you by Collective Prevention Services and the Department of
The Department of Communication, also known as DCOM, is a multimedia service department under the Ministry of General Affairs. DCOM also serves as Emergency Support Function 8 before, during, and after a disaster, once the Emergency Operations Center has been activated by the Prime Minister. Once an official weather bulletin has been received from Met Department St. Martin, it is immediately channeled through the various media operations executed by DCOM. The weather bulletin in its written form can be accessed by the general public via the official government website stmartingov.org. If you're a Facebook user and you have liked and follow our Facebook page, facebook.com/SXMGOV, you will receive a notification that the weather bulletin has been posted. You can also follow our St. Martin Gov TV production of official national messages delivered by the Prime Minister as chairperson of the Emergency Operations Center via the official YouTube channel of the Government of St. Martin at youtube.com/Government of St. Martin. The messages also can be accessed live via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM or audio on demand via the Government of St. Martin SoundCloud that is posted to our Facebook page as soon as updates are issued about weather or government operations before, during, and after a storm or hurricane. The Department of Communication understands that during any type of disaster, communication is critical. So we encourage the general public to pay close attention to the official channels of information provided by the Government of St. Martin via DCOM so that you are properly informed and alerted to any approaching threats and for up-to-date and accurate instructions to follow before, during, and after any disaster.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylveria Jacobs.
St. Martin, welcome back to Prime Minister Talks. I'm Cedric Peterson alongside the Prime Minister of St. Martin, the Honorable Sylveria Jacobs, and we're talking about the Caribbean Reform Entity as proposed by the Dutch as we deal with this dialogue that's taking place between the countries of the Dutch Caribbean and, of course, with the Kingdom of the Netherlands. In this second segment, we're going to talk more about that counter-proposal. Prime Minister, how can this counter-proposal better serve us as a country moving forward?
Okay, so the first thing is that St. Martin has a governing program. St. Martin also has a national development vision in production, so it is being vetted at the moment by our stakeholders within the community. And we have looked at, aligned, made a chart with all three. So the proposed Landspakketten, country packages by the Netherlands, our national development vision and our governing program, and we have found 14 areas of overlap, 13 to 14 areas of overlap. And so these are areas where we already agree St. Martin needs to work on these areas. This is why this new government came into being, because we have seen over the years that promises have been made and not executed. And now, of course, our starting position is very, very bad financially, etc. So yes, even if we hadn't been in this position, we would have needed a financial injection to get some of these reforms done, or at least investments. I don't even want to go into what has happened to previous approved investment, capital investments that have been withheld that also have us in this position. So it is important for us to agree with the ones who are willing to borrow or grant us the funds on what we want to achieve. And we've already seen, hey, there are 14 areas that have our complete agreement that these are areas to work on. We are busy assessing at the moment where we are with those reforms already, because some of them are already in the process. And that's something I believe the Dutch proposal does not take into consideration. And when they block opportunities for us to have discussions and negotiations, you're not able to bring that forward. So we're currently working on the document to be able to present this, since the opportunity for the dialogue has been a little less than we've anticipated thus far, since they are not looking at our proposal because it is not the one they sent. So as far as I'm concerned, they haven't even looked at how it will be beneficial to them or give them what they want still, while still meeting us halfway, therefore getting a real consensus. In us having a consensus, in us having an agreement moving forward, we are then faster able to bring some of those reforms to fruition if they require Dutch intervention or assistance. And for St. Martin, by focusing our eyes now on the things we need to do very strictly, that we're not in isolation as ministries working together, whether we get through with the Dutch funding or not, we as St. Martin would have a good view on where we are going. The reforms gives us an opportunity to get the financial injection, as well with an agreement with the Dutch, gives us also the financial injection and the human resources and technical resources that may be necessary to execute them. That is a benefit. The difference is that we want it on terms that we can live with and agree with, that does not step on the autonomy of our parliament and our government. That is the benefit of ours. But as I said earlier in the program, what we want to do doesn't even require a consensus kingdom law. We believe that it is coming from a point of distrust of our government that is rooted in the past. And if we're saying we want to move forward on fresh footing, we should not be held hostage as a country, as countries within the Caribbean region, based on whether it was disagreements or quote unquote failures, and especially when we've also agreed that the blame can lie or does lie on both sides of the Atlantic, that we're willing to make a fresh start. And St. Martin has continuously done that in some of what we've put forward to the Dutch, and they've admitted that, but yet the stance remains what it is.
Prime Minister, the stance of the Dutch, do you view it as being a challenge to us when it comes to our autonomy and giving us the opportunity to strengthen it on our end? Because clearly we are the youngest democracy on the planet. So how do you present that back to the people of St. Martin when it comes to this challenge that we have with the Netherlands? Can we change the narrative here? It's not that we are looking at the Dutch and saying, oh, the Dutch is doing this to us. I view it as a citizen as being a challenge to strengthen myself as a young democracy. What's your view?
Yes, definitely, Cedric, as a first-time Prime Minister as well, it is a challenge for me to balance, the status quo, how things were going, and trying to be the change that we want to see. We have 40 years or more than that. Since 1954, we had a Netherlands Antilles, and then we moved into 2010 with our new status. And our starting position back then as an Antilles was not good for St. Martin, the island territory. Our starting position as the, constituent state that we are, this country within the kingdom, also was not what it should be in terms of our starting position, having zero infrastructure for the country status and having to build from the ground up. And I think a lot of people don't stop and understand what that means, and the responsibility to assist in the preparation for more autonomy. So the autonomy we asked for, we got. We agreed to certain levels of supervision. Unfortunately, hurricanes, changing of governments, and other aspects has kept the progress back somewhat. But if we look at other countries having started hundreds of years ago, it is a learning process. Our community is getting used to this is what things are now. Let's move forward. We have more responsibility. Let's stand more on our own feet. We are used to being very dependent. So I think the narrative has to change in that we have to stand responsible for our things. We cannot just give over our autonomy that we have recently earned back to the Dutch government. And we would like to build on trust. So the people of St. Martin need to understand that it is not an all-out war. It is fairness. It is equity. We are talking about gelijkwaardigheid in the kingdom and not gelijkheid. So not equality, but equity. And as a teacher and as an educator, I have always tried to use equity in dealing with students on the job. As a leader, everybody is different. So it's not going to be equal. Everyone should get what they deserve. And I believe St. Martin, in making some of the changes that we're making, we deserve the opportunity to lead.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for answering that question. So we're going to close out this break, go into our break for the head into the third segment. I want to get into the options because there's that little discussion that's taking place that makes one feel like as if St. Martin, as an autonomous country within the Netherlands, don't have options. Let's get into that discussion when we get back. St. Martin, stay with us. This is Prime Minister Talks.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
This hurricane season 2020 will be a difficult one. With the ongoing pandemic, it is essential to be even more prepared this season. Have your disaster kit ready with all the essentials. Make sure that you have enough canned foods and bottled water. Be sure to make copies of all your important documents and safely store them away. Have your first aid kit ready in case of any eventualities. Make sure to pre-plan and do what you have to do to secure your family. And finally, make sure you keep up to date and get your information from the official governmental communication sources and services of the Meteorological Department of St. Martin and the Department of Communication DCOM at Facebook.com/SXMGov, the website stmartingov.org/hurricane, the radio station 107.9 FM, and the YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. This message is brought to you by the Government of St. Martin and the Department of Communication.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Hey, St. Martin, good afternoon. Welcome back to the third segment of Prime Minister Talks. I'm here with, of course, Prime Minister of St. Martin, the Honorable Sylvaria Jacobs. As we close out the program in this third segment, we want to talk about the options that St. Martin has. Prime Minister, that's the thing about this negotiation process that kind of makes one feel when they pay attention to the dialogue going on, that we don't have options. Let's look at that. Do we have options as a country throughout this negotiation process?
Well, most definitely, Cedric, I must say that I am not without hope. I believe we're dealing with human beings. I have faith. And that is why we will continue to work on our country packages, what we want to do, what our reforms are, as well as the counter proposal, finalizing that and pushing it forward on one end to ensure that the Netherlands and the rest of the world sees that we're very serious about handling in a very responsible and efficient and effective manner to be able to plan and then execute the reforms with the assistance of the Netherlands. But of course, it will require us to act as partners. All of us, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin are united in that. Our parliaments are united as well in sending a very strong message to the Dutch Chamber. We know that the Dutch Chamber will be having a deliberation with the State Secretary next week, where we have persons also within the second chamber that is, let's say, hearing the cries of the Caribbean islands. So I do not believe that it is over. We must continue to push our narrative, also in the Netherlands and internationally. There is a plan moving forward in terms of EU, as well as other options if the Netherlands continues to hold this stance. We are very, very concerned. That question was asked of me in the press briefing as well. Are we concerned? Of course we are concerned. And we are exploring every other option to be able to increase revenue to the country, as well as cut costs so that we are not spending as much, preserving our funding so that we can carry the country as long as possible. So we're looking at all options, valuation of our government-owned companies for the event that it does not go well. That's another option. And strangely enough, the Dutch State Secretary, who is the only person that the Prime Minister and the Kingdom Council of Ministers authorizes us to speak to in this regard, has stated in his response after the Kingdom Council of Ministers meeting, the last part, they will assess whether assistance to St. Martin is still necessary. And I am like, wow. So you do know that we have options. It is not the most feasible option, of course. It would put us in more debt. And that is something we're trying to avoid as we get towards more financial strength. And as a kingdom partner, you can assist us in this. And some are even wondering if it is a nasty chess game that is being played to get us to the point of bankruptcy and then put in a whole other measure that takes complete control. And I think both of the options are very negative ones and would play out very negatively for the Netherlands in the international community. There was no one in the fight against the other European countries because we saw this similar stance when the other frugal countries within the EU were holding the other countries of Spain and Italy and etc. hostage in getting assistance without all these heavy conditions. We don't have that kind of a voice in the international community, but we will continue to show the similar comparisons out there in the world, bring the attention as much as possible to the international community, and hope that the Netherlands will see us as willing partners to come to a real consensus, thereby addressing our counter proposals, the proposals of Curacao also. They're also looking at, for instance, getting the Raad started to give a ahead of time advice. And they're insisting, no, agree to it as is, and then once it goes to the Raad van Advies, and then changes can be made. But then for sure, we have no say in how it goes. Our say is now as countries, and we are really looking forward to the Netherlands giving us that proper hoor and wederhoor negotiation, back and forth, and take the COVID-19 reality that we're all dealing with, which makes us feel like we're being blackmailed because we have a need, an acute need. We're getting assistance. I cannot bash that part. Definitely, we're getting the necessary medical assistance. We're getting even assistance if we need military, etc. But you're stopping us from getting the financial assistance we need to ensure that people don't go hungry because we refuse to give up our autonomy. I think it's a form of extortion. It is not a good look for the Netherlands, and we would like to put this part of our history behind us and move forward positively.
Prime Minister, I'd like the aspect of the international ability to communicate. You mentioned that we have an opportunity there. It's not as strong as we would like it to be, but I picked up on that. How can we strengthen that as an autonomous country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands? Is there possibilities and there for us to strengthen that?
I mean, there were talks in the past, and coming from a source that we don't like to hear about, that we should assess our kingdom statutes. And I think they're probably running from that as well. But I think it's very, very necessary. We saw the problems we had with the dispute regulation. So in this case, who do we run with a dispute to? The same persons that we have the dispute against. So that's why the decolonization aspect that our MP Martin Helliger is moving with, and I have to answer in Parliament to some of the questions she posed to government in terms of that, is a very interesting one. And that can also make its way through the international community in terms of, has the Netherlands done everything it should have done prior, even in preparing the Netherlands Antilles, and then in making the agreements that we made back in 2020, back in 2010. It's 10 years on. How does the EU look at the reporting aspect that the Netherlands no longer has because we're so-called, independent, but we're not. And we have still a lot of conditions on us that I think if the EU can get a good look at, that they will see the Netherlands differently. And I think we should also remember that the Netherlands is in a political year and they're coming up on their elections. So all of that is playing into the hardball as well. So I really, really would like us to move away from, because we're talking about human lives on St. Martin, and that is where we are fighting for our people on St. Martin.
Prime Minister, as we're wrapping up this third segment and the end of the program, final words.
Thank you, Cedric. We're really, this goes very quickly, and we understand the need as a country for the Netherlands to hold countries responsible when they are assisting financially. And we also see an opportunity to finally implement necessary reforms that we have identified for ourselves in various governing programs over the past 10 years, in the vision that we have for St. Martin. I have been repeating this vision that we want to be a multi-pillared economy whereby everyone has opportunities, but there are certain actions that must be taken by this government in order to provide those opportunities. And we think that that is a silver lining in all of this. It gives us that opportunity to do that. And that is why we have proposed this form to all, for both parties to have what they need. And I believe our sisters and brothers in Curacao can see themselves in it. As much as none of us want to see another consensus kingdom law, if the Dutch will only deal with a kingdom law, then that is the way to go. Or we put a kingdom law completely aside and we work on our country packages and agree on the entity that will be established to monitor it. The plan moving forward is that we have to finalize our St. Martin country packages, address the pending conditions that the Minister of Finance has submitted to the CFT, I believe, yesterday, or is busy with that, and finalize our counter proposal as much as possible while continuing to lobby with key stakeholders so that we can create more backing for that as we move forward to the next Kingdom Council of Ministers on September 11th.
Prime Minister of St. Martin and the Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Saverio Jacobs. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being a part of this edition of the program. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this edition of Prime Minister Talks. If you've missed the program, be sure to tune in for rebroadcasts on St. Martin Gov Radio, 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day. And of course, be sure to log on for video on demand at the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin. That's facebook.com/SXMGOV, or go to the official YouTube channel, Government of St. Martin. On behalf of the Department of Communication, and of course, the Cabinet of the Prime Minister of St. Martin, the Honorable Saverio Jacobs, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in.